welcome to another episode of Chrysalis Satori, the place where we have all American burnouts. And today we are going to talk about our actual title. So, what is burnout? Mr. West, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. How about you, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's great to see you as usual, as usual. So, in many of our coffee talks, I should say, we go meet for coffee. We'll talk for hours. Um, But one of the things we constantly bring up, it seems to be what is burnout. Like we were suffering from this in the U.S. and then we found some relief, I guess, when we started traveling, and we were trying to answer the question of why. Like what about traveling makes uh, the burnout kind of fade away a little bit, and we came up with some solutions, but we really had a hard time defining what burnout really is.
Well, it's
So
personalized, yeah.
yeah, because it means different things to different people. So we decided we would make a whole episode dedicated to what is burnout, what are the symptoms, what does it feel like. Um, and let me bring up this. We came up with a text wall. So there we go. So what is burnout? You want to go down the some of our definitions we came up with, buddy?
Well, this is a list generated based on I asked for what is burnout for an American that has been in the same job for 20 years. So that it is specific to that, because that kind of, well, that mirrored my situation as a starting point. Some of these definitely call out to me. Overall, I think it's a pretty good list. Some are specific to my situation. Some I think will be specific to yours,
Hmm.
and we can just you can talk those through if you want. But like the emotional and some of it, to get back to the original goal that you were discussing, why did you think travel? And I want to be, even a little more definitive on that. I wouldn't say that travel itself is the solution. Living outside of the system you're in, I think, is more the point. So travel, be it short term. So like when we say travel, we're talking about living somewhere else
Hmm.
for a year at a time, slow travel, something like that. But I did, even in when I was vacationing, even when I was just traveling in Europe and staying for like a month at a time in different Eastern European countries before my burnout, it introduced me to some of the differences, or maybe some of the longing, some of the things that I felt or thought I felt inside, or had read about. Obviously, since I hadn't been to those places yet, that I got to experience that uh, did resonate ultimately into an awareness of that there was something missing, something lacking. So,
Hmm.
anyway, back to the list. So, as you see there, yeah, emotional exhaustion. Um, and we can talk these through as we go through them or as a whole. I think every American feels this one, right? This is just like the day in the life of the typical working American,
100%.
the feeling drained and unable to, because in America, who are you? And we start describing our job and what we do and what we own. so our life perspectives are different. So I think everybody has the kind of like that sense of work that drains, exceeds personal resources. That's I don't know, ubiquitous, that first one. I think everybody has that.
Yeah.
Cynicism and detachment. This was one that absolutely fit for me. I I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I did get this sense of anybody either in a certain age group or had been in a industry for a certain amount of time. I also think just America kind of breeds this. More than anything, the call out in that first description, developing a negative sense or apathetic attitude towards work. I would say apathetic, period, and not even towards work. Just
Hmm.
apathy. I think America breeds apathy. We feel there's so much all the time. Everything trickles down to you. It's your responsibility. We're going more that direction even more with the Great Reset and Klaus's viewpoint. And I see people embracing this. I see posts on LinkedIn right now this week. People are out there boasting what the future of work is like and how that, in Klaus's definition, the new future, you will change careers. So you will re educate and change careers every 6 years,
Hmm.
and you're going to live to be 100. And I think we're already doing that. And you're going to work, to your 80s, maybe longer. And there are some, if you're actually doing what you love to do, or shouldn't even say that's so cliche. If you're doing something that you are passionate about, or really engaged in, or get some level of satisfaction out of the work itself, doing the work or the results of the work, the fruits of it, helping others, whatever that might be, then I can see that because being out of the workplace as long as we have, I definitely noticed a sense of I lost my identity, if you will. Again, being American, what I did was my identity, so I've had to reestablish what that is without a job and without the roles that I had, and maybe just the identity that doing the work within an organization gave me. So I had to replace that, but I think America as a whole kind of just breeds apathy. We think everything's bigger than us. We can't do anything about it. Everything's just too big. So
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I think that applies to all of life as an American is a breeded sense of apathy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean
Feelings.
that's the
Mhm.
first question like people tend to ask you like it's never you know here it's different like they ask how are you and how you feel you happy things going well that's great in the U.S. it's typically oh hey hi my name's Paul what do you do for work like the work becomes people's identity and so often and I do agree with you 100% like I think that people if you do something you're really passionate about and you really love you are way ahead of the ball game like that's
Or you feel
so
rewarded somehow, even if it's not a passion, because we use these big words like it has to be this huge thing. Reframe that. And these things are changes and stages in life of what brings you happiness. So maybe so as long as you're getting some sense of fulfillment or enjoyment, either out of the work itself or the result of the work
mhm.
or what it does for the people that you're supplying it to, something like that. As long as you're getting some sense of accomplishment and reward out of it that way, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. The cynicism I definitely felt. I mean, probably about a good 6 years before I moved, um, I was very very cynical. Like I felt like I had no time to myself, no time for anything. All the stuff I was buying for in my house and sailboat and cars and everything.
Dopamine hits. Yeah.
It was for nothing, and I didn't have time to even use them. I was just kind of caught up in the everyday life, and I didn't. Uh, I mean, I was so exhausted by the time Sunday rolled around, and I would like want to sleep all day and just sit home, and I couldn't even enjoy the things that I had purchased and bought and built around myself, and it made you very cynical. It aggravated, like I don't know, it reflected onto people that I cared about, even it caused stress in relationships. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, and how many times I don't know about yourself, but at least for me in the industries that I worked in, I mean, how many talking about the apathy again, just of other people. You ask them, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I mean, some of it's kind of are you genuinely asking, or is that just a salutation? Is that just a way of saying hi and good morning, or
Yeah,
a way of breaking into a conversation, hopefully? But generally, no. It's just you get responses like "living the dream," and it's just a
yeah,
it's not a real answer. It's just a closure. So their cynicism and apathy is rife, right? And they speak it that way in just these closed, no, I don't want to talk responses.
yeah.
you know, um,
I personally used living the dream so many times. So
right?
yeah,
What kind of right? That's just a cynic, closed. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. I'm just going
yeah,
to be doing the same thing again tomorrow, so don't remind me.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
it's that's a powerful statement. It really is. Like I've never even thought about saying living the dream was so cynical, and such a ridiculous thing to say.
it's a shutdown. It's not a response. It's
It
a
is.
shutdown.
It is. And yeah, you definitely felt that, man. Like I noticed in the second one too, the reviews reduced professional efficiency that lended into it as well. So like the cynicism breeds the efficacy. So I don't know. Like I felt that in my work. Like I got it's so redundant and it was so. I don't know. You get so numb to it, and you just stop performing and stop caring about these things. Like you don't care. You're gonna get paid, no matter what. It becomes like a self depreciating prophecy almost. Like it's you start on that path and you can't get off of it, and you're on this hamster wheel. We talk about the hamster wheel a lot during our coffee sessions, I guess. And I don't know. There's no recognition, you minimal opportunities for growth, and you kind of get on this endless cycle of I'm just going to do what I have to do to get by, and you find no fulfillment in even if it's something that you previously loved, you can easily uh, lose faith in that, lose track of that. I've noticed that with the band, like music. I love music. I was playing music every weekend and um, singing every weekend and stuff. And it got to where that was just a chore. It became from something I loved into something I was like miserable and was dreading to do because if you think about it, I'm working 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday performing, and then Sunday I'm just exhausted and I can't enjoy any of the things that I purchased that I thought I would love to do, like going sailing or going fishing or whatever. There's never enough time to do them.
Yeah, on that note, I can compare what you're talking about the band work. So that's like a word of warning about, in fact, doing something you're passionate about or something you love. There's some caution to that. I knew someone was intimate with for a long time that was excellent cooking. Went to San Francisco Culinary Academy, loved it, was just fantastic, and everyone would always ask her, why don't you do this? Why don't you be a chef? Why don't you cook, these meals? What? And her response, and this was a very long time ago. I love that she had this perspective, and it's always stuck with me. Like, why would I do that? Why would I turn something I love into a job? It would ruin it, right? It would destroy it. To metricize it, to scale, it would turn it into a job. It's no longer a passion. So yeah, a little word of caution on some of that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Making the thing you love into something that's
A requirement.
yeah, it becomes a detriment to yourself. Like it definitely changes the way you look at things, though, too. So like something you think. I don't know. There's very few things that anybody could do for the rest of their life. I mean, it lends. It's the proof is in the pudding. Like look at people like Britney Spears. Superstar, multi-million dollars, and she's miserable, and it's visible. You can see on her Instagram videos that she's losing her mind, and I'm like, you have everything. You're living your dream. You're doing everything you ever possibly could have wanted to do, and yet you are absolutely miserable. So there's a lot of truth to that. So
Uh, where the FSC applied to me was due to, okay, so two things. One, me just as a person, as an individual, I've always needed change. I cannot do a job that has anything repetitive. So it's like this: when I would take on new work or a new project or a new idea would get pitched to me and something that I needed to build out, if I could not automate it, I wasn't going to do it, because it's
mm-hmm.
something I'm going to build it once, and then I'm either going to hand it off to someone else to maintain and own, which a lot of times people are happy to do because it gives they think that's job security and gives them something to do, or I'm going to automate it. One of the I can't build something and then just maintain that. I need something new. I always need that simulation. So I was very fortunate with the manager that I had for so long. She was wonderful. I worked for her. Uh, I worked with her directly for 17 years at that one company.
Yeah,
And she identified that in me. I never had to say that. She identified it in me before I knew it, very early. And so anything that was new came to me. That was kind of like almost an undefined role. Was like whatever's new goes to him. Let him figure this out, absorb it, disseminate it into the organization at different levels, for different roles that applies to them and where their benefits and the gives and the guides of it are. So I am definitely like that, but I was fortunate enough to have somebody to utilize me properly that way.
that's really nice.
So what happened to me in the end was, well, the absence of that person. So our organization went through a first time early retirement program. I didn't qualify for it at the time, but what if I did? Those were good numbers. They're never going to do that again. They offered everybody a deal too good to turn down. And basically they just wanted anybody that was on a pension plan out. That's what it amounted to. But so great incentives if you took it. And again, you'd be fool not to. So we had a huge, immediate, sharp, drastic 90-degree culture shift with all this absence of skill and knowledge and leadership. And so much of the work that I had done up to that point was about optimization, standardization, one way of doing things, one form for everything, one source of truth as far as where documents and internal sources were maintained, how they were maintained. We had done a great job at this. And as soon as that leadership was gone, the fiefdoms and fiefdoms popped up. New, younger leadership was stepping in and immediately just began to tear down all of that and had everybody doing their version of the same thing. And so often the time, it wasn't a tweak. It was just the name of their part of the organization or their region, even though they did the exact same thing as the rest of the organization in the nationwide company. Um, so I saw all this happening, and there was just I felt like there was just no longer a place for me. So that was the FSC for me was just I was no longer relevant. I told and I said that in my as I was resigning, I felt like there was you don't have a need for me anymore. You don't need a strategy. This is not what you're doing. Everything is reactionary, putting out fires day to day. There's no long term view anymore. It's just day to day and short goals. So that's where I felt.
And protectionism. They protect their job with, you know.
But they don't. But they don't. It's just that's a short view. They think they
Exactly.
are, but it doesn't. So
Exactly.
it wrecked everything we had spent years putting into place. And again, they didn't have that mindset anymore. They were just looking to build each person's own little kingdom building began, and so there was the loss of cohesion. And again, like for my skill, for what I did, there was like, well, there's you don't have a need for me anymore. So I withdrew, I resigned. That was a big part of it. So yeah,
Gotcha.
that reduced professional, FSC was for me it was
Actually,
efficacy. Yeah,
yeah, and that rolls into the lack of change or stimulation. So, and you're talking about generational and technological shifts. So, yeah, your story actually leads right into the next two things on the list here. So it's really really prophetic. Really is. So let's talk about career plateau. So did you feel that too?
big time. Same thing for the same reason. I absolutely felt, yeah, and sometimes that's the always. Unfortunately, this is the case, and this is going to be some of the books that I'm going to refer to later. We'll talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
American culture, corporate culture is not even just American, but corporate culture is largely this way. Unfortunately, that often the only way you can continue to move up, and maybe it's not just because you need or want more money, it's just for the change, it's for the growth, it's for the personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
There reaches a point, there's nowhere to go but management. If you're a great salesperson, and that wasn't my role, this is just me, but if you're a great salesperson, if all you can do is now become a sales manager, well, now that's a leader role. You were a great
Mm-hmm.
salesperson. That doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader or have those skills
That's
at all. And maybe
yeah.
you can grow it. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But what if it isn't a fit? What if you don't enjoy that? What if you don't want the pressure of that? It puts you, into a corner. And again, fortunately, in the tenure that I had with the manager that I had, she often identified these things, saw them coming, and created roles for me that simply didn't exist in the organization previously to have a place for me to keep from having to step into something that where the organization wouldn't benefit from me in that role. And neither would
Mm-hmm.
I. It's not where my skill set was, but this is so often the case in most corporations. It's just you've got to fit into the hierarchy or the structure that's there. So it's not nuanced, right? And people are more nuanced. So yeah, you can grow into it. Yeah, you can. And this is where it comes to the American way. You can push yourself, you can force yourself into it, but how does that translate into proper growth or happiness?
And at what
You're having to
cost?
become
Yeah.
something that you're not or really good at
Yeah.
or necessarily enjoy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I definitely feel you there, and we're definitely going to we're going to do a whole episode on some of these things as far as American culture. That'll probably be the next episodes that you watch. We'll
what
start,
about you on that same one?
man. I was getting I was growing into different positions, but I didn't like what I was doing. It's one of those situations where I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, so I was doing a lot of different things, and trying to find my niche in the world. I think I was happiest when I was towards the beginning of my career. Um, I used to love technology, like computer hardware, and I loved building computers. I loved selling computers. I loved uh, the new new hardware, and this is, I mean,
I miss hardware.
I did, I loved it so much, and that was the happiest I think I've been in my work is when I was toying with and building computers,
Building and
testing
fixing.
them and
Loved.
fixing them. Yeah,
Loved. But that was a lifetime ago. That was
it was,
pre-millennia.
it was,
I loved that.
and it became a destroyed industry. I used to be in computer, distribution, and then everything was going online with super cheap from China and whatnot, and
Everything's obsolescence and replaceable.
you couldn't make any money on it anymore. So
I mean, they're gluing devices together now, so you can't repair them.
literally, yeah, it's become disposable industry. So that's another problem with a kind of you know, I guess late stage capitalism that we're, and we'll talk about this in another episode too. But that you know the Chinese way, I guess, was making $1 on everything instead of $10 on something. So they would sell 1,000,000 of them at a dollar profit, and we just couldn't compete with that, even though we were building better products, in my opinion. So yeah, it was definitely. But from that point forward, then I got into management, I got into software, I got into programming, and I got into different things. And um, as I evolved, I started losing my passion for what I was doing. And it got to the point when I was here for the first year, I guess. Um, I didn't touch hardly any of my technology at all. Like my computer, I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to. I barely used it. I had three. I brought three laptops with me here, and I barely touched them. Like they were in a drawer for the first year I was here. And until I started my other channel, my music channel, then that was the only reason I brought it out. So kind of learning how to do, the producing, how to make videos like this, like practicing on this kind of stuff. And I'm still new to it, but it does give me a little bit of passion. Like, okay, it's learning something new. I guess learning was my
Well,
thing
it
that I
feels
needed.
good again. Well,
It
yeah,
it does, yeah.
I can talk about that. I went through a terrible. So yes, so for me on number two, the technological shift. So as I said before, now I was always in a perpetual learning, always new mode. That was good for me. I liked that.
Hmm.
But there was a point where things began to shift. The rate of change, spiked and has not come down. It's only continued to go up. Maybe that was just the timing of it, along with all these other moving pieces. Maybe that by itself wouldn't have been a problem. But I absolutely reached a point where I was starting to hear myself think and say things that had heard so many other people, usually another generation older than me, had almost always said that I didn't quite understand at the time. And just all this, it's like I just didn't want to learn anything. And I was tired of trying to keep up. I mean, it was just like you could learn something new and apply it, and that
Hmm.
knowledge was viable. It was useful for quite some time. Now the knowledge was as disposable as the technology
It,
as the
yeah,
hardware we're talking about. I mean, it was just quite a rat race. Quite well, that's not even the best way to describe it, but it had a certain pointlessness to it.
hmm.
You couldn't embrace it and really enhance it and run with it for very long. Just so
It,
it's like what is even the point of adapting it today if we're going to throw it away to tomorrow, sort of thing. So
that
I
is.
reached that point of burnout. I didn't want to learn anything more, and like you, I went much further than you, unfortunately, in my burnout. But with my burnout, I had this moment, this realization that I had felt, and this goes back to maybe some of the earlier points where you didn't feel fulfilled. Just again, all these things combined in your life, you were doing more than. So I had loved everything I did up to that point. I'd loved computers, loved software, loved all this, loved learning, loved the new texting. On top
Hmm.
of it, I enjoyed it. That wasn't work. I that's just what I did. It's how I spent my time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I had a perspective shift. Just a 180-degree just shift of all of a sudden I felt I had been trapped behind a monitor. I felt I had been babysitting a monitor for 20 years,
Yeah.
babysitting a screen. And that changed when that happened. And that was just part of the burnout. Unfortunately, as I tell people, burnout happens to you. It's not a decision you make. It isn't, it happens to you. This is like a trauma that just once it's in play, it's in play. And I'd never had anxieties or any of the things I started experiencing. I had such a resistance to being around the computer. I had such a resistance to being online. I started having panic attacks. And so for at least a couple of years, at least a full 2 years after my burnout and after I had resigned and I had begun traveling. And this was during the pandemic. If I mean, I didn't touch or use anything. I mean, I barely used my phone. I had a computer, but I never used it, never opened it. To touch it, I would procrastinate so long before, I mean, weeks, maybe a month
Hmm.
before I would touch it. And I would have such anxiety. I was breaking out into sweats. I mean, a full, like, I had to declothe, I had to take everything and just break it out. And I would soak my garments, break out in a sweat if I had to touch like a full computer. I could handle the phone a little bit more, but even then, everything I did was just highly minimalistic. I put everything I could on autopilot
Hmm.
and just and procrastinated like crazy. Anything that dealt and really not even just technology. A lot during that same period of time, almost anything that dealt with some level of responsibility. Because I was always such a machine. I was just people would call me that, calling me the machine. I was just on top of things. I was always, how do you know this? How do you? I'm like, I read. That's
Yeah.
my yeah. I
Well,
read.
it used to be knowledge was power, but now the internet's so you know, it's got so much experience on the internet itself. So now your general knowledge, I've noticed that with technicians now, they don't actually know their
No,
thing.
they just
They go and
read it,
look
look
it
it up in
up,
the moment,
yeah,
right?
in the
Yeah.
moment, fix it in the moment, but they don't have any understanding of it. So it's there's a bit of shift at some point in America to where your knowledge, the things you learn, uh, not only do they become obsolete, especially in the computer world, but they're becoming uh, the very lightest form of I've read it, I fixed that one issue, now the issue's gone and it's gone from their mind. Whereas I would retain these things and I'd know how to fix it the next time.
Yeah.
But that's kind of going the way of the dodo. Now, there used to be great value in me as far as a technician and software, where I could fix almost anything for anybody because I knew it, I understood it, I learned it very heavily. But as the things change and progress, suddenly it's, oh, that language is no longer used, and this, we're using this, and it's all kind of a plug and play. It became very, very generic and very commercialized. So it was very strange, man, and it lended to what am I doing all this for? That's why I started feeling like why am I on this constant wheel of change? And I loved learning things, but like you were saying, it became to where I'd learn it and then it would become obsolete. So
Immediately disposable.
why spend the time learning it? And it was just nonstop for me. And I guess it kind of lends into the late stage pressures. Like balancing your midlife challenges and every. But it kind of all ties in increasing financial for retirement, the lack of recognition, those kind of things all go into it. The culture changed at some point in America where I literally felt like I was like, I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here. And it wasn't to run really from anything. It was just I needed some sort of different environment because I knew the environment I was in was just completely toxic, and I started going like I felt it was destroying everything. It was destroying my relationships with people. It was destroying my the cynicism was kind of cropping up into everything that I was doing, even with my kids. Talking to them like, oh, it's not a big deal. It'll pass, and that those kind of things. Instead of being actually sympathetic to what they were going through, um, I was like, I've already been down that road. Don't worry about it. It'll change into this. But some of the advice was good, but it was also not the best way to parent.
Maybe not as sympathetic as
Well,
it
or
could have been, right?
that compassion, like you start losing the compassion for other people, like you become very, very walled off, and
Right. Just you lose the ability to listen with compassion. And a lot of times that's it. Maybe it's not the
mhm.
life lesson or what you say that you need to give them. It's just having a really empathetic ear, genuinely hearing them, taking that in and giving the response back in the form of gestures and touches
Yeah,
and tones more than the message itself. And you lose that energy
yeah,
sometimes.
and then like the last option as far as the symptoms to watch for. The one that really struck with me was the irritability or frustration over minor issues. So something really minor would come up, and it was just a small speed bump became like a huge hurdle for me. Like it was, I mean, dude. don't you? I'd get frustrated at work. I remember saying to some of my workmates, like, "Don't you know this by now?" But you don't, you know. And it's just a simple little thing. Hey, do you want to do this or this? And I'd like blow up and be like, "No, you know what I want." Blah 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 blah. You know. And it was just all because of just the burnout feeling coming in. Like it was very strange.
Well, that robbed you of your own emotional energy, so you had none to give.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it felt. And even during like performance like shows, like I got so cynical at and when you're entertaining people, it's the worst thing in the world to happen to you. So um, you know, I'd be at a show singing or something like that, and somebody would request a song. I'd be like, "That song sucks," you know, right away. I wouldn't even be like, "It's a good song, but we don't want to do that yet." Or I would just be like, "That song sucks. You know, you suck. Get out of here." You know? And I'm like, well, "What am I
Oh
doing, man?
no.
Yeah, what am I doing?" Um, so it was a decline in quality, you know, of work, of motivation, uh, you know, utter loss of joy for everything that I was going through. So it was definitely a dark period, but for some reason that black cloud when I moved here it all went away, and I'm not 100% sure why. And we'll probably head into this more in the next
Another,
episode.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Actually, that might be a good place to stop this episode. We can kind of work on the next episode talking about the whys of what burnout is starting to do.
Yeah, for me on the symptoms, I would say definitely that we just talked about the loss of joy or passion, just everything that really I was. I mean, in a way, I was lucky. My work, I always said this for a long time. I mean, most of those years, even when I came to the company, I was already aware. I felt lucky that there was a job for what I did because I just did what I loved, and like I never really looked for work. You know, people found me, headhunters found me, opportunities came to me. So I was fortunate that way. I just did what I loved and enjoyed it. And again, it was just embracing the new, loving the new, staying on top of it. But again, we're talking about it was at a different rate of change back then. And you know, to lose that again was like losing my identity. You know, if I don't do this and I can't do this because I had never had anxiety before, I had never had insomnia before, so like these symptoms, I absolutely
Hmm.
was having chronic insomnia. Tried a lot of different things for that. That none of them really worked. The mind was just running and rambling. I was hearing voices, and I mean it was myself, but I mean I was talking to myself so much in my head. It was so loud. It was so overwhelming. I couldn't quiet it either. It was. I thought I was going crazy, you know. And we'll get to that in the next episode. There's some materials that I found that helped with that a lot. There's a lady that discusses this on a TED talk. That anyway, we'll get to that one. Um, the irritability and frustration for minor issues, yeah, I think that's very representative. But I also think some of that we'll say that's the American lifestyle as well. I mean, post burnout, after it hit me, and I was still in it before I left the U.S. Uh, you know, I noticed some things that were just, I guess, I would have considered normal. Again, we consider some of our frustration in traffic and driving so normal that we don't maybe consider that one of these symptoms, but they are. I
Hmm.
mean, we're unrationally, unreasonably upset about a lot of things, and it's just a vent, right? For a lot of what we're holding in, all that
Yeah,
pressure. The
it's an outlet for our
Yeah,
rage. You know.
right. But that decline of you know, motivation, I had to give up everything post burnout. I mean, I had always been fitness oriented. I mean, every routine I had, I quit. I gave up everything as a part of what defined me because so we're just what we consider ourselves or who we are is so often just a list of habits. Really, they're just a set of habits and routines we go through every day,
Hmm.
and that's what we call our life or normal or and we identify as that, like that's me, or you know. And so in after I discovered meditation and started working with that, I had decided just to give up everything in an effort to free myself so that nothing defined me anymore. So what is really me now that I'm off of not just all the hamster wheels that I had created for myself, all the regimens, working out, everything. Which I got to say wasn't good, but it was necessary. Just what I went through, I wouldn't suggest it. Giving up working out. It's such good medicine for the brain.
Yeah.
Such good medicine. But yeah, I had to give everything up. So uh, it's easy to see some of these symptoms as almost like, well, this is just kind of like normal life. Well, that's what you really got to pay attention to is it doesn't have to be. It isn't today for me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but in the American way of life, it's a pressure cooker. What's the hypervigilance? That's the term someone used that I like so much
Yeah.
to identify the sense that I get. Like, so when I leave Europe and I fly back to the US, which I'm about to do in a couple of weeks for a couple of months to see some family. Um, yeah, I used to call it a dark energy, and I couldn't identify what that pressure was, this insane tension that I just felt from everyone around me there. Like everyone was just waiting to be triggered,
Yeah.
like wanting to, like, please say something so I can lash out physically or verbally or both. Or
I called it the black cloud. Like
yeah, well, right.
that's exactly what I call it. We're
uh,
ready for the lightning strike. You know.
but someone I was visiting when my friend passed away from cancer, and his sister in law, we were talking, and I was discussing, and she just popped right out of her mouth. And that's perfect. The hypervigilance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the everything that is on you, and it's your responsibility. Everything as an individual, and more things are coming down the pipeline. Again, we're talking about career changes, your investment choices. You don't have pensions, so you need to be an investor as well. You need to have this knowledge and stay up to date on that to properly get a return.
Mm-hmm.
All these things that are pushed down to the individual, that it's just so that hyper sense of vigilance. You're not just driving a car. Not in America. It's different here as well. In America, when you're driving, you're trying not to get sued into oblivion. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I used to have a what do they call that? An umbrella policy, right? Because I was kind of in the sweet spot of, well, I wasn't rich, but it was just enough that I wouldn't be able to afford a lawyer to fight it. So the
Right.
umbrella policy gives you a team of lawyers from the insurance carrier that will make whatever claim go away, right?
Yeah.
But just that sense of awareness that you had, that we're so litigious and we're so cannibalistic with each other, that you're not just driving, you're taking a risk of someone trying to be predatory and take advantage of an opportunity, even if it was purely an accident, and not to mind how minimal, so everything's like that. Everything's very intense there, and it's just not like that everywhere.
Yeah. No,
um,
definitely. And yeah, travel definitely helps with that. Yeah, I could agree with you more, man. And that's kind of the purpose of this channel. Like we we're talking about our personal experiences. I mean, we're not psychologists, we're not doctors or anything, but we came to an understanding of what was wrong with our lives, I think. And so, all we really want to do is tell our story on where we went wrong, where we screwed up,
this is what happened to us.
and
Yeah.
this is what happened to us, and maybe give you some recommendations on things you could do to kind of either prevent that or understand it when you're going through it, and then you can maybe navigate it better.
I
Do you,
just want to, yeah, share the tools and the books
I was
that
going
I
to say,
found that helped get me back on my feet.
yeah, actually, well, what are some of the books that you really enjoyed that really helped you understand these issues?
Oh, well, we'll definitely, I think we'll bring those up on the list on the next one,
Okay.
but and not necessarily in a row. So let me try to remember. So the first book I read right after I resigned and was traveling, even though it was the pandemic, so I was traveling within the U.S. since I couldn't leave the borders yet. Was Neuroscience for Dummies, because
Mm-hmm.
again, so I had been, when the burnout began, I was going very heavy on alcohol. I mean, really heavy on alcohol.
It's very common.
Trying to alleviate the anxiety, trying to sleep, the insomnia, which I'd never had before, anxiety, which I'd never had before. I did not want to go on some of the prescriptions. I read about those. I actually did. What is the one? It's kind of funny. It's one of those things, like when you mention that you're on it, everyone comes out of the woodworks, and it turns out everybody in the office, or at least the organizations surrounding my organization that I worked with at the company, because someone had suggested Lexapro, and
Yeah.
I know you're supposed to stay on it for a certain period of time before seeing results, but I only took it the one day, and it felt weird. I felt like John Malkovich. Like I was inside my body. I was just looking. I felt nothing, and I was just like looking through portholes for my eyes, and I was just so numb. It scared me to death. So I dropped that immediately. I did not. I just the once that was it. There was too many withdrawal and side effects on a lot of these medicines. I didn't want to do that. So I tried cannabis. It was legal at the time. It was legal in Nevada, where I was at the time in Vegas. So I said, why don't I go to a Budrista, give that a try? So I did that, and cannabis did, in fact, now I said you should treat it, and I did. I went in with the perspective of treating it like medicine. So this is not something I'm going to use forever. This is not something I'm going to stay on forever. This is for now. This is medicine. That's how I looked at it, how I treated it. Um, Too much and too long is definitely a problem, at least for me. I know a lot of people are going to differ with this, but it's like when you go to therapy, are you going there as a coping mechanism and never applying a change, or are you going there to discover what you need to work on and make the change, and then you don't need the therapy anymore? So
Right.
treat it like medicine. At least that was my outlook on it at the time. And cannabis did allow me to meet myself for the first time. I realized it helped me become aware that who I thought I was really my id. I mean, my ego. It was really just, it was a persona. And I was running on autopilot for God knows how long, probably 30 years. I was like I was asleep behind the wheel on a Tesla on autopilot. And it was just autonomously driving. And I was shut out of that discussion. So I kind of met myself for the first time. So again, I wanted to, well, how do I do this now? How do I get the real me? How do I fix myself? So then I got into meditation, and then very lightly, just discovering these things. They were all new. So applying some of that. So that's why I read the neuroscience for it, because I wanted to understand this. What do I have to work with? What is causing this? What is the cannabis doing? Why did it allow me to meet a version of myself that I hadn't known for so long, or had forgotten about, or put away behind a lot of coping mechanisms? That was really the ego. The ego was just this this guy that everyone else knew, but it wasn't the real me. It's who I had become to function in this world, or at least in the world that I was in at the time. And so, neuroscience for dummies was a big step. I think it's a very plain read. This is not a self help. It's just like reading. Of course, this is not going to strike a chord with everyone. But remember when you used to get a user's manual with a car, say like back in the 80s, it's kind of like that, or we would say stereo instructions. It's just the facts. But for me, it was a lot of discovery, again, of understanding what is there, what you have to work with. It was a basis to then build a lot of other methodologies and understandings off of. I've used that understanding from that point forward. So after that, much later, I would say mindset. The New Psychology of Success from Carol Dweck. And there's a lot of books out there, right? A lot of stuff is motivational. Motivational is not what I wanted. That doesn't help. It's like, okay, yeah, I got the energy, but I need the how.
You wanted to
How?
understand.
I need how.
Yeah.
I need to know how. Don't just, pump me up and like go do this and write down everything in a very high level. Give me how and prove to me on the how. I need data to back it up. I want technical data to support what you're saying, not
Right.
uh,
You wanted to
good
understand
intent, not just good intentions and ideals
the
and
tool,
lofty
the
goals.
tools you're working with, and then the why and the how.
Right. You see how structured I am. I'm like, I start with the
Yeah.
wiring and then I go from there. Right.
Yeah.
So
And
the mindset helped because at least I think this is all over the world after I've traveled some now. I think this is most every culture, but certainly, definitely in America. We are taught, you're born a certain way, you're a certain type of person, this is what you are. And that's just not true. That is just not true. You're a malleable walking bag of chemicals. You can be whatever you want. If you can appreciate the fact that certain drugs can change a person entirely, if you can appreciate the fact that hormonal changes and hormonal therapy can change a person entirely, it shouldn't be hard to accept this.
yeah.
Mindset gave some good how-to on separating yourself from your habits and from your routines, distinguishing the differences, and then being able to become who you choose to be. Um, uh,
It's a powerful
let's
statement,
see.
buddy. Who you
Uh,
choose to be.
well, and how to get there. Some of the habits and things to do.
Yeah.
So I'll try not to go because I'll just mention these other books because I can go much deeper on all these. Think and Grow Rich is an old one. I read a revised edition recently that I liked much better. It has more updated examples like Apple instead of necessarily just Graham Bell and so on. But for me, that book is still a little more ethereal in how it approaches and how it explains what your for me it's still more belief based than measurable fact. But I'll find a lot of the goals and a lot of the approaches very similar to my favorite, and it's the book that I'll refer back to for a lot of things for real change. That is MRI 30-year study based examples, diagrams, processes for each sub process and how each one builds on the other. You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter by Dr. Joe Dispenza. I discovered Dispenza off of a podcast. I loved how he communicated things, so I read his book, and I'm going to refer back to that one a lot. It's almost like a one-stop shop. Even though I read all these things at different points, at different layers of accomplishing different points.
He's like a
It
consolidation of all of
it
that.
is a how to
Yeah.
really invoke change, and it focuses more on connecting rather than necessarily praying or believing in something. It's connecting to the infinite. Using quantum mechanics.
Hmm.
That once you see something, it's there so as long as you look for it. But when you don't look for it, it's no longer measurable. That sort of thing. Rather than the ether that is spoken to more, like in Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
Um, Atomic Habits by James Clear. I thought it was James Cleary, but I think it's James Cleary, and it just got truncated off my list here. Sorry. Love this guy. He always gives credit to everything he's read. He doesn't take credit for a lot of things. All his points of reference, he gives you, hey, where I got this information, how and why. I like that very much about him. He puts into words a lot of things that I've already always done myself in terms of habits and why. One great quote that will apply to a lot of these things that I'll probably bring up more than once is, once a measurement becomes the goal, it's no longer an effective measurement.
Hmm.
So this is where, once you get into habit, it's perpetual change, and that's what I like about it, and that fits into your placebo and everything we're going to talk about. Everything is life. It's into perpetuity. There's no finish line. There's no winning. There's no goal. You're never done. It's continual growth and betterment. So you're always reaching for an ideal that you'll never obtain, but you will better from that all along the way, right?
Continue to reach for sure.
All right. So Atomic Habits, and Simon Sinek has a couple of books that I've read. I think he's got 3 or 4, but a couple that I've read that I absolutely love. And this I'm going to refer to, as we describe in a later episode, the machine that we're in. The matrix, the machine, the rat maze, the hamster wheel. And how and why this is where travel comes in, because you can't really see the maze if you're still in the maze. So you have to get out of the maze, off the hamster wheel, to really see it for what it is, and that takes time as well and exposure. But the infant game, more, and his is business focused. It's about industry leaders and so on, but it's also metaphorical for life. Absolutely, everything is continuous.
And we're
Um,
going to link these in the description below so you guys can look
right.
them up. But yeah, they're all definitely worth a read for sure. And they,
If you want to get ahead on those, we're going to refer back to these through probably the remainder of our media. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great foundation, a great starting point for understanding what these things, what we're going through, and what you may be going through. And maybe that's why you're tuning into this. That's kind of why we named the channel what we named it. Chrysalis is a an insecting change,
Metamorphosal change.
metamorphic change. And Satori is describe what Satori is in your terms. You had a good description the other day when we were talking about it.
Well, Satori is, well, I think by definition, it's sudden enlightenment, immediate sudden
Yeah,
enlightenment about something specific,
yeah.
and it's usually Satori. Generally, there's other words for this too,
Hmm.
Gestalt, but that's immediate understanding rather than an enlightenment. So it's a little different. The enlightenment is when referring to Satori is also usually from an emotional moment, something sudden. It doesn't have to be traumatic. It could be a in your life experience, or it
Hmm.
could be a moment of the best sex you had in your life. It could be it could be something just that is so emotionally impacting. It comes a profoundness washes over you, and a sudden understanding that you couldn't quite grasp before comes very perfectly clear from that point on in your
It
life.
changes you forever, for sure.
So yeah, like the Chrysalis, I mean, you're talking about going from something ground based to air based, right?
Hmm.
So significant change, sudden enlightenment and understanding. So yeah, that's why we put these words together.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it. So yeah, let's wrap up this one, man, and we can
Yep.
get on to the next. And yeah, like I said, like and subscribe. We'll link all the books and stuff below if you want to get ahead of these things. And that's the purpose of our channel. I mean, up till now, we've kind of described why we are where we are. Now we're going to get into the meat of what we really want to accomplish with this channel, which is
Just want to share these understandings. Maybe
yeah,
they'll help you. Maybe they'll prevent you from getting into burnout. Maybe they'll help you during it
maybe
or after. Just sharing my journey.
it's just a little bit of a small little slice of our lives to maybe help you along and it's very confessional for us. We pour these things out to each other all the time, so we might as well pour them out to the world now and see what happens. So we appreciate you so much, guys, and until the next time, I hope you have a great one.
Like and subscribe.